1, 2.
That's cool. I thought the mic man would know.
That was a long time ago.
A long time ago. Okay, so I guess a good place to start, obviously given that you've got a lot of history, is kind of the origins. I mean, Ray, what was your first kind of entry into the Bristol music scene? I'm assuming it was when you were growing up.
You mean making myself or listening to music?
What kind of? Well, yeah.
Listening was Punk 77. That was my first seen live band, Clash. So I started from there, and at the time there were a few bands from Bristol that got their names in the Enemy, Music Express, Latina's the Pigs, Social Security, Exits.
Yeah. And then later on, people like Pop Group.
Pop Group came later on, Maximum Joy and stuff like that, Blue Airplanes.
Yeah. Okay, so and then how did you get from that to being involved in? Was it running the sound system?
No. I got I had a keyboard, and I heard this band was looking for someone with a keyboard. I couldn't play at the time, but I did have the keyboard, and they were looking for someone with a keyboard, so I got the job. That's how I met Rob Smith.
Okay, because Rob was in that band then, yeah?
He was in a reggae band called Restriction at the time, but he was also this other kind of band. Okay.
How bad?
Yeah. Okay. This other band called Sweat. We didn't do anything. I did a few practices and a couple of gigs.
And so how did it progress from there to? I mean, was it before you guys started doing production? Was it kind of were you running a sound system, DJing and so on?
My friends were doing the sound system called Free Strike for sound system, which we'd take around wherever. We used to gate crash festivals back then. You could gate crash festivals, take all the equipment in and just set up, demand electricity and set up and play.
Pretty straightforward.
Well, but you could get away with it then.
Oh, yeah.
There's Glastonbury and stuff. You could take vehicles, dogs, motorbikes, all of that. You could go on site with. So we just load up and force our way in and get some electricity and set up from there. Just money, just for the fun of it, kind of.
I'm a bit conscious that Pete sat here not saying anything, so I'll ask you a question now. So how did you first hook up with Ray and Rob? I'm guessing that was a little bit later.
Well, it was I met up with Ray initially first through a mutual friend called Froggy. Froggy's quite a figure in the whole Bristol scene, St. Paul's, and he knew that I had my little studio set up, and thought I should meet up with Ray because I think because Ray and Rob, they had their setup. I was kind of like teaching myself how to make music in my bedroom studio, and he just thought it would be a good idea to link up with Ray and that, because I mean at the time it was when all the digital equipment was coming in, like drum machines,
yeah.
And so I was sort of not fascinated, but it was like, yeah, this is wicked, you can make music by yourself rather than being a band, which is what I wanted to do at first. And it was like, yeah, I got a drum machine, digital, made by Yamaha and stuff. And when this guy Froggy, our mutual friend, hooked me up with Ray, it was like, yeah, these guys, Rob and Ray, they've got the same sort of, but basically they're doing the same sort of a thing that I was doing, but on a bigger level.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, wicked. You know what I mean? There's other people who's doing this just like myself,
And this was like what, like kind of 85, 86 or something?
This was about like 86, around about 86, the mid 80s, yeah.
Mm. So did you start working with those guys pretty quickly?
Well, it's for me it was a bit of a mix-up story. I started to teach myself how to produce music, and then I met up with Ray. But round about not just long after meeting up with Ray, I met up with a guy called Mushroom, and at the time Mushroom was a part of the Wild Bunch crew, which was a very established sort of DJ outfit in Bristol. They were bringing a lot of musical styles and trends what Bristol wasn't used to back then, like mixing break beats and stuff, which everybody was like, wow, this is wicked. And I met up with a guy called Mushroom in a place called Special K's, which was a sort of a hub of musicians, DJs, and just a social kind of a mix-up place where people just met up and stuff. But anyway, yeah, I had a 4-track recording machine in the back of my bag, and he was like, "Oh, that's wicked. What you do with that?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm into music, you know." So from there, I got on really to be good friends with DJ Mushroom. So, and at that time, they were forming their Massive Attack outfit as well, and he was like, "Yeah, you should come and do some stuff with us." And so I was basically bouncing between both camps, the Smith and Mighty camp, they were doing their thing, and also Mushroom from Massive Attack, they were starting off their thing. And I basically was going from camp to camp, because I mean, it was more of like friends at that time, you know?
There seemed to be a lot of it. I mean, if you look at, if you go through, say, Discogs and you look at the production credits of the records that came out around that time, there seemed to be a lot of fluidity, a lot of kind of different people all based around St Paul's East and all kind of working with each other. It wasn't so much where you were doing one thing and they were doing another and other people were doing other things. There seemed to be quite a lot of crossover. Certainly in terms of that, you guys did production, didn't you, for people like Carlton and Fresh Flora and people like that?
Yeah, well, back then, like Peter said, digital equipment was coming out. Meant that you could do tracks without having a whole band there, but it was quite expensive, Stuff you can get really cheap now was really a lot of money, so if someone had something, you'd kind of have to share it kind of thing with other people.
What sort of setup did you have in the studio then? You're talking about maybe when you were making around about sort of 87, 88, when you were making sort of...
Tascam, 8-track desk, I think we had as well. Master onto cassette. SH-101 triggering stuff. That was before we had the computer, before we had a sequencer.
Was that sort of triggering samples?
SH-101, you could trigger that with the 303 and the 606, which we also had. We roughly had 303, 606, 707, 727, DX7.
Yeah, but it was mad, because even prior to that, I mean, I think the first drum machine that I had, I didn't even think I had a name to it. Do you know what I mean? But it was like a square box, and you had like two knobs on there, and 2 pads on there, and you program your beats by like hit space, hit space, and then you select the snare drum, hit space, hit space. Then you select the hi-hat, hit. Do you know what I mean? And then press play. And
it's quite a long-winded process.
Yeah, man, yeah. And there wasn't even no secrets in that thing. Do you know what I mean? You just kind of like let it play, and you get your little keyboard and play along with it. Do you know what I mean? And then record it onto a 4-track or a 2-track machine. Before before even the real digital drum machines came in.
One of the things that people quickly picked up on, actually outside of Bristol, I think in particular, when the kind of early Smith and Mighty singles were successful, the cover versions in particular, was that there was a kind of sound that was different to what was happening elsewhere in the UK, and it was obviously there was a huge hip hop influence and dub reggae and so on, but also kind of house and things like that as well were in there, weren't they? So was it just things that music you were interested in, you were just putting them together? There was no necessarily, was there a conscious attempt to fuse those styles?
No, it was just stuff that we were listening to at the time. Hip hop was happening, reggae we'd been into, and then before that it was the reggae thing from 70s. So it was just a case of doing that, and having limited equipment, you couldn't afford to buy the best equipment at the time. You could get stuff that would do it, and would do this thing, but it wasn't the greatest sounding, and it wasn't the highest quality, so it kind of had a low res sound about it, which made it different to what everybody else was using, because everybody else was using Akai samplers and stuff, 44 sampling rate, kilo sampling rate, whereas we only had a cheap 32 thing. You could tell the difference with the sound, but that gave it a unique sound. So everything else that was going out, if we'd have had better equipment, it might have ended up sounding a bit like everybody else's.
But those records seemed to kind of cross over very quickly, in that there were kind of so you pressed them yourself, didn't you, yourselves originally, and then was it FFRR London Records, then eventually sort of about kind of 88, 89, 90 sort of thing.
89 FFR got involved, but we pressed some for Revolver actually, Revolver.
The record shop.
Yeah, Revolver was the one who funded the release of our stuff.
And did they do that for kind of other people in Bristol at the time?
Yeah, after we got one together, Grantley asked us how we got it out, how we put it out, and we told him Revolver. So he went down, spoke to the same guys that did us, and took him on an idea down there. He said, look, we worked on an idea with him, helped them produce a song with Colton singing on it.
Yeah, so that's the first version.
Any Love, yeah, and took it down. Revolver did the same thing that they did with us. They funded it and put it out for the distribution. So.
When did you first hear? I'm guessing it was probably journalists, sort of referring to what was happening in Bristol at that time. Long before Mixmag started coming up with the trip hop thing, which was later. But the whole, the Bristol Sound. I mean, because presumably you guys didn't think, oh, we're making a distinctive Bristol sound. You're just making music.
We were trying to make stuff that sounded like everybody else's, but it didn't quite get there.
Who did you want to sound like?
That's what it's true.
Who did you want to sound like then in particular?
Well, we just wanted it sounded polished, and its hi-hats sounded thin and crisp, and there's space between things, and we've got 8-track with Dolby S or something, Dolby D or something. Crap, you're only going to get so much, But that ended up with it sounding different to everybody else's.
Because there's always a kind of a progression to what you did, obviously through the years, because you made a lot of music now over, what is it, like nearly 30 years, I guess. Well, it would be 30 years if you started in sort of 85, 86.
Yeah. We started in the first band, me and Rob been together about 30 years.
But you were always absorbing new influences and things as well.
Yeah. Everything that's come around, we got into rave. We did all that. Like I said, punk. We started off with punk, kind of new romantics slightly.
That's probably lesser known fact. Smith and Mighty fact.
Yeah, slightly like some of it, but
Smith and Mighty, the new romantic years.
All the major things like rave. We got into that. Full on drum and bass.
Jungle, obviously.
Jungle. Right up to dubstep. It's like
But again, there is the thing that seems to draw everything together. Of course, is bass.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, is that just the fundamental? Anything you do, is that how you start? Is it the bass, the beats?
No, but it has to be in there. It has to be in there. Like I said, we come from sound systems. Rob was in a reggae band, so in the 70s, if you go out and you go to a disco, you were just hearing lower mids, higher mids. You wouldn't get any bass. You go to a discotheque, you wouldn't get no 50s. You wouldn't get none of that at all. The only place you get that is in a reggae thing, and the overuse of effects. You wouldn't be getting that in the charts at all. You put a little bit of echo on it, you'd hardly notice effects on chart records, but reggae records were overusing it and creating a unique sound of their own. So that's kind of where we came from, listening to the bass. The bass was the main thing, you have the tops and you bring it in and out, but the bass was the main thing. So when we used to make music, in the early days, we didn't know about monitors and playing flat and stuff. You have to think. We just set up speakers, what we used for the sound. We used hi-hat, tops, boxes and stuff like that, and EQ it like we were listening outside, and so we'd mix with that on it. It was okay for a feeling, but it wasn't accurate when you tried to play it. When you put it to a record, it wasn't what you thought you were listening to in the first place.
But it seemed to be round about that time, like kind of between about sort of 87, 88 and about 91. It wasn't just Bristol that was going for the bass thing. It seemed to be that there were people making sort of relatively new forms of British dance music around the country. So, for example, in the north of England or in London, and Manchester and so on. And but again, it always seems to be about the bass. All that Jamaican sound system culture thing was incredibly strong.
Yeah, that crossed over. Every town, major city's got has a Jamaican influenced area, and that's just kind of spread out. As long as the town's not too two races, you know, that will spread out into the thing, whereas Bristol's pretty good on the race thing, so we kind of got it more than some other towns did, you know, they're willing to accept their immigrants.
So,
better.
did you fairly early on, kind of as kind of towards the, you know, tail end of the 80s, early 90s, did you guys start going around sort of DJing and doing shows around the country a lot? Or did you kind of stick here?
The DJing thing sort of like came after putting out the tracks that we did, and a lot of the DJing thing where we started really was from the More Rockers thing. Really,
yes. Was that you or all three of you set that up?
The More Rockers thing was more so myself and Rob, but the More Rockers label was anything that we could have pushed out through that label. That label was basically like a window to put music out, different music as opposed to what was termed at the time trip hop, which I don't know, but most people who was involved in Bristol at that time was like, "What's that?" I mean, hated that term.
It's a typical journalist thing, isn't it?
It is. I mean, yeah, it's understandable that you have to have something to sort of pigeonhole to soul music, but it was just like, "What's that?" I mean, I remember we supported Tricky, wasn't it? We sort of supported Tricky at that. Was it Hammersmith Palais?
Empire.
The Empire? Somewhere in London area. Do you know what I mean? You know, and he came on stage and we were like doing backing him up, you know, and he came on stage and like, yeah, who in there loves trip hop? Everybody went, yeah, and he went, fuck off home then. Do you know what I mean? You know, it was just like, yeah.
Perfect, good answer.
You know, but the More Rockers thing was basically was a spin-off from going to these raves in the late 80s, early 90s. When the record deal was happening with Smith & Mighty, you know, we'd been in a recording studio, you know what I mean, I'd be lying on the sofa while they're mixing the album, you know what I mean, and then I'd be tuning into the radio, finding out where the meeting points were and going to these raves, do you know what I mean? We would go to these raves, you know, because they had been to a couple before me, and they were like, yeah, you got to come to one of these raves, Peter. I'm like, yeah, okay, do you know what I mean? So we go to all these raves, do you know what I mean? And it was like wicked, you know, you just seen this new form of music sort of taking a turn, you know, the whole 4/4 house music thing, being sped up with break beats put on it, and it's speeding up the break beats, with, you know, and then all of a sudden there's breaking off into all these different genres after a few years. The hardcore, jungle, techno, acid. Do you know what I mean?
Sort of the UK garage as well later.
And the UK garage thing later on, you know. But on the but when it was taking that jungle turn, it was something that really that me and Rob really resonated to. You know, we were like, yeah, man, we want to make some of this stuff as well, not just trip hop. Do you know what I mean? You know, we want to make some more up-tempo stuff, you know, this 165 stuff, do you know what I mean? And we just said, yeah, let's just form another pseudo name, do you know what I mean? And we said More Rockers, because More Rockers was in relation to rockers music, reggae, roots rock music, and that was the whole More Rockers thing. So that was basically another outlet to put out another form of music, which we were doing, which for us was a good thing to do, because, you know, as an artist, you don't want, I didn't feel to be restricted into making a particular style of music at a particular tempo all the time, you know. And More Rockers was a perfect vehicle for making something a bit more up tempo.
Because the More Rockers as a label, there's quite a lot of different kinds of stuff on there.
Yeah, you had
you never really stopped.
Yeah, you had Henry and Louis on there, which was another which were another recording outfit in Bristol, and they were coming for more of the roots dub angle, you know, Henry and Louis, you know, and who else was on there?
There's a guy I know from Sheffield actually. He put a single out as On, was it, or something like that? Yeah, this guy called Parrot and Robin Taylor Firth.
Yeah, that's right. Do you know those guys? Right?
Yeah, I know that because I know those guys. Yeah, I was talking to him about it the other day. So. Yeah, I've lost my train of thought. That's really bad. I was going to say, in terms of before the More Rockers as a label, you had the deal, didn't you, with FFRR, and you'd been recording the album. That is it right that didn't quite turn out?
Yeah.
With them, it kind of yeah. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
The deal. We fell out with the singer just after we signed the deal. One of the singers, and that just made the label go completely cold on everything. And we finished stuff, we'd take it to him to play, and at the time Peter Tom had just got his Radio 1 spot, so you'd take it along and play stuff to them, and he'd listen to the criticisms they would have of the stuff, so he couldn't understand it. You know, no, we're not going to play this. We won't be able to play this. So we'd come back and say, no, they don't want to play that. Can you change this? Can you bring the bass in later? Can you do, you know, basically telling you what to do. So we ended up, you know, kind of doing nothing for 5 years. We were doing stuff, but we had to wait for the deal to finish. They refused to put anything else out.
I mean, was that in the days where you kind of the labels, major labels like that, or you know, major label affiliates or whatever, would kind of give you in advance, so then you kind of had to pay that back.
Yeah. They check a load of money. You give your solicitors. You've got the best deal there's ever been. No one's ever had these perks, these points. You got, you know, this is the best deal that's ever been made in this country. But when it comes, push comes to shove, they don't put it out. All that stuff means absolutely nothing.
I mean, when you eventually put out Bass's Maternal,
yeah.
I mean, how much of that material from that period got used then, or did that just all get scrapped? I mean, did FFRR or London run it?
No. The stuff from Bass's Maternal, it was the stuff we were trying to get them to put out, and we were going, you know, it's. You can't. There's some of them because back then some of the bass lines were just, you know, you could hear them, but we could feel them more. They were more like just tonal, you know. There was actual sound to them, and the fact they couldn't hear them on Radio 1 was a big.
I guess because they wanted something that was a kind of potential pop crossover.
Yeah, we get every time we go in every meeting, you play us something that was in the chart. Can't you do something like this? It'd be like.
But I mean, the irony of that whole thing is that they done the sign up in the first place because you were different, but then they tried to change you into something the same. Do you know what I mean?
But again, this is a story that I've heard quite, not this particular story, but the idea of being signed, you know, because you've done something different and successful and interesting, and then you get signed, and then suddenly the label's going, can't actually sell this, you know, it's not going to sell as many as we want, and then and some people, they take that as they go, okay, well, we'll just do what they want, and others like yourselves just kind of walked away, sat on your hands, eventually got fed up with dealing with and walked away.
Yeah, we just had to wait. Like I said, we had a 5-year contract. We had to wait for the contract to run out before we could release anything else, even though we had stuff ready to go. As soon as we got rid of kind of that thing, then we did the Bass's Maternal, which was okay, you know.
Right, it's widely considered a bit of a classic these days.
Well, yeah, I still play it, and I still play it.
Yeah, so having made it, how do you assess it then? It's, what is it, 21 years old now? 21 years ago it was out?
Yeah, about that.
Something like that?
Yeah.
It was 94 it came out.
It seems a little older because the ideas were around before we actually released it. But yeah, you know, if London just had a bit more, you know, bottle and just gone for it. But to them, they like 30,000 units. They took everything in units and stuff. There's 30,000 units to them. It's bad. It's crap. You sell 30,000 copies. One thing to them, it's not impressive. It don't work for them.
No.
Whereas, you know, you sell off your own back, if you're independent and you sell 10,000, you got your money back, and it's a hit to you.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, but of course, since then you've gone on to do further music. You worked with K7, didn't you? The studio K7 in Germany.
Yeah.
I mean, how was that experience? I mean, obviously they're kind of like a large independent, aren't they? I suppose.
Yeah. That was how we wish the London deal would have gone. They backed. Whatever you gave them, they didn't question the product. They took the product as it was, and they backed it. They sent you around, they arranged tours. You know, we never went to 5 years in London. Never got one gig out of it from London. Never went anywhere. Signed with K7 for that one, two albums, and we travelled the whole world, DJing, and we went everywhere.
And that was, I mean, obviously you'd kind of, in some ways, you'd be made to almost wait for that, because that was what, like, kind of 2000s, wasn't it? Early 2000s. So this is kind of like 99. So this is like kind of 15 years after you kind of started making music.
Yeah.
That's quite a long gestation period. Or in terms of to kind of get around the world.
But when you're making music, if you're doing it right, you're doing it because you love it. It's not a work, it's a job. So 15 years of doing something you enjoy is no problem.
I mean, are you guys still making a lot of music?
Tried recently, tried to got some rhythms together recently over the last couple of years. I got caught up with the family thing, so I had to do that. But I've been doing mashups of video mashups
Yes, you told me about this earlier, this video. So you're doing more on the kind of audio-visual
thing. Yeah,
kind
but
of
that's
tip.
just something I do is just in between times. But you know, I enjoy doing it. To me, it's a hobby, but I get paid for doing it. You know, I play out and get paid for doing it. So.
Because obviously Rob went and did a fair amount of kind of sort of solo stuff. Well, he was working with you guys as well, but releases, you know, RSD or Rob Smith or whatever. I mean, is he still doing that? Is he?
Yeah.
He's away now as we speak. That's why he couldn't be here. That's why he couldn't be here
Okay.
today. You know, he's away doing this.
But here he is by video link now. I couldn't quite have thought that. But it would have been quite good, to be fair. So I mean, how do you assess? I mean, what do you think of the current kind of state of the scene in Bristol? I mean, do you still pay attention to what's going on locally?
I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy. You know, I mean, the barometer to test that or to know that is just speak to people who's in and around the club scene, and I'm still on the club scene 30 years later. But you know, and you'll find that when you speak to a lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, I moved into Bristol for the music. Do you know what I mean? You know, and that's a good telltale. Do you know what I mean? You know, people's moving to this town for the music. You know.
But it's almost, if a city gets a reputation for not necessarily a certain kind of music, but a certain musical aesthetic, say, which Bristol has. Bristol has got this reputation worldwide as being about sound system culture and bass and so on. So it will always attract people because of that, and you'll always have kids now in Bristol might be making techno records, say, but they will still be influenced by sound system culture and bass. It's always the bass, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah, that's when you make music. First of all, when we was making music, we'd make it for the people around us. We know what people in this town. We don't know what London. You don't know what London's going to like or any other town, but you know what. When you go out to clubs, you know what's going to make people go, yeah.
That's right.
So you make music for your town.
Yeah. And we were exchanging ideas pretty quickly between each other, because I mean, not just our crew, but all the crews. What was going on in Bristol then at that time, you know, we would exchange ideas really quickly because we're going to the same clubs. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You know, and like Ray said, you know, we appreciate it. Like, yeah, check out that bass line. Yeah, that's heavy. Do you know what I mean? You know, and you go back and that's what you do. Do you know what I mean? You know, so your ideas were getting exchanged very, very quickly, because I mean, most of where things were going on in Bristol was sort of in a certain radius, you know. I
mean, what at that time in the kind of mid late 80s to early 90s, where were the kind of places where the parties were and the clubs and things? Was it things like the Dugout?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ray probably can speak more about it. I caught the last 2 years of the Dugout. I was little. I was about 15.
Well, that closed at about 87, 88.
Yeah. I was still sneaking out of the bedroom and sneaking out and trying not to get caught by the parent. You know what I mean? Kind of a thing. And so I caught the last couple. Yeah, I was the young one in the Dugout.
But yeah, most all the Grant, Wild Bunch, Too Bad, all the different DJ crews would go to the Dugout. It was the only kind of club where you get a multicultural, multiracial.
And that was on Park Row, wasn't it?
Park Row, yeah. Park Row. Other than that, there wasn't many clubs that, you know, if you had a tan, you could get into.
Yeah. People coming from uptown, downtown. Do you know what I mean? You know, working class, middle class. Do you know what I mean?
Was that a problem then? Was it Bristol at that time in line with maybe some other places generally in the UK was a little bit more, not actually segregated, but in terms of the crowds weren't quite as mixed, maybe?
I think it was down to the promoters and the club, the people actually run the clubs, kept it that way for as long as it was. We could have Cinderellas, we had the odd little soul thing that would go on there, but most of it would be in your own area, St Paul's, or if you wanted to go out and you didn't want to have to dress up, like, you know, put suits on and wear crap clothes or whatever, you could go. Dugout was the only place you could go, and they'd take you as you were. And you get so you go into the club, there'd be a little section, you'd have the new romantics kind of down this end, and you'd have those who wanted to drink right down the bottom end, the ones who just came to drink, and you'd have the dancing thing, and you had a few people selling a bit of weed around the dance floor. Those who came to dance would do the dance floor. You'd have your little section, but everyone would get on. It was like, yeah.
I mean, how important was that place to Bristol? Because it's not necessarily spoken about that much outside of Bristol. Like, people will talk about, say, the Hacienda, or they might talk about the warehouse in Leeds.
Yeah. It was a hub. Do you know what I mean?
It was the same as that. The Hacienda was for Manchester. The Dugout was for Bristol. Because like I said, we'd hear the DJs, we'd hear the latest thing, and people go, you like you said, oh, listen to that bass line, or listen to that break, or listen to this, and you'd all be there, and you'd all take it all in.
But once it closed down, where did people then go? What sprung up after that?
Well, you had other clubs then. I mean, what was going on then? I mean, you had the
Moon
Club.
Yeah. Tried to be the next day.
Yeah, the Moon Club tried to. Yeah, but and then it changed. Like the Moon Club is what's now called the Dakota.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, Fekla was going on, and Fekla is still going on now. I think that's a pretty established place now. The Fekla, you know, it was going on back then.
So it's kind of a lot of the same places.
Yeah,
a lot of the same spaces, not the same
spaces.
names.
Yeah,
but there is a lot more now. It is a lot more easier to, you know, I can walk downtown and get in bars and places and. Not tonight, son. No, not tonight. You used to get a lot of that in centres and 80s. Some of it was because they didn't want you in there. Some of it was for your own safety. It was like, you don't want to come in here, so kind of warning you off.
I suppose there was still, even though Bristol has always been kind of more mixed than a lot of places. I'm guessing there was a lot more racism then.
There was, but as towns go, this one's more tolerant than most places I've been anywhere. All over the place. Different countries aren't as tolerant as this town in this one.
We can feel the love in the room for Bristol.
Yeah.
So it's probably a good idea now, because obviously we are getting on a little bit for time. We've probably got about a quarter of an hour left. So I'm sure there's going to be people out there that want to ask questions. So can we stick their hands up if you've got a question? It's always inevitably George with the first question. Come on then, George.
I think it's been a theme that I've kind of noticed throughout, but it has been kind of unsaid. Like, the internet now means that you don't really have isolated scenes anymore, and obviously, no man is an island, as in no city, but like, you guys were isolated to an extent in the way that now you can't have like ideas developing, because not maybe in isolation, because as soon as you put it on SoundCloud, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And like, how much do you think that isolation, or to that extent, has made the kind of what you guys did and what kind of Bristol went on to do a thing, if that is a question?
It is, you're right. It was back then there was no internet and all this stuff, so anything that was going on elsewhere, we couldn't be influenced by it. It was just what was going on in your city and what people into. But now, like you said, you have a lot of access to a load of things, and you do, if you hear something, you can't help, if you enjoy it, you can't help but be influenced by it. So it kind of makes it a little bit harder to be, like you said, an island.
Yeah,
it does.
I was kind of like, how do you feel that influenced what you guys? I don't know if you feel that made a huge difference on what you guys did.
Obviously, because then we stopped sounding like when we were doing our thing. I think London was into swing. I think it was. Was it swing? Yeah, swing. Yeah, go swing. Go. And if you're changing every couple of months, then they'd be on the next. This is what this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. But we're isolated down here. That we're sticking with what we're doing. And eventually, if you, like Chris was saying on earlier on, you stay at something, you'll get good at it. What you start to produce is good. And we're not influenced by these outside things. Going, this is the latest fashion. We've got to be listening to this, dancing to this. This is what we're doing, and we'd stay at it long enough to get okay at it.
I think that's kind of a trend throughout the kind of Bristol takes something in.
Yeah, and makes it and holds on to it. And if you don't jump onto the next thing, this is what we're doing now. Eventually, a year or so, you'll be good at what you're doing.
Yes.
I remember probably 1989. I got played the demo of Cool Nature, the album.
Okay, yeah.
The demo was one of the best things I heard at the time. And the few people that heard the demo, we all loved it. And then it got taken to the record company and all that stuff happened. Yeah. Have you still got any of those original recordings? Because that basically.
That's a good question.
Where's Mike Darby?
Carlton played me that album, right, when it just come from the studio, like fresh, he just played it for me. He's like, listen to this, and it was wicked, especially Cool Nature. And then it happened. Have you still got that? Would you consider putting that out?
It's only on cassette, mate. We used to master cassette at that
I
time.
know, I remember.
So it's only on, really, I don't even know if we still got it, but we have cassettes somewhere, but we go for some cassette.
To be honest though, things can get, sort of remastered from cassette. I mean,
we have done
a lot of our
we have done remastered First thing me and Rob ever put together years before we even thought of putting anything. We did a thing. My friend from the Vision Factory, Steve Ailey, put a video to it. Brain Scan, it was called. Yeah. Japanese egg. Is it the egg label? Japanese. We released it from cassette. We cut it from cassette.
Angel's Egg.
Angel's Egg. That's it. Yeah, you can hear us. You can hear it's from cassette.
That seems to be a big thing in that there was kind of a hardcore of people in Japan that were massively into what was going on in Bristol.
Yeah, totally.
There was a shop, wasn't there? A Bristol
dedicated
shop.
This shop.
Yeah.
Naoki.
Naoki on Miwako. Yeah, the shop. Yeah.
that's what about.
Still going?
Yeah, he's still
good.
Yeah, Dish of Zero.
Yeah.
comes over now and over there, brings his family over. He had his honeymoon in Bristol.
Honeymoon in Bristol, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, they came and had their honeymoon. What was it? The Fekla. It was. They came to spend their honeymoon in the Fekla.
Romantic.
Yeah, check that out.
They went back to stay the wedding night in the thing.
No, they didn't sleep. They didn't sleep in the Fekla. But there's a whole scene of it. Like when we got out there for the first time, it was like wow. They just like spoke about Bristol was like a big carnival every day going on. Like yeah, Bristol's like this, Bristol's like that. And it's like. Well, yeah, it's okay. It's not quite. It's not quite like you ain't gonna just get there and it's all kicking off like that. Do you know what I mean? You've got to kind of find and mix and blend and then find out what's going on. You know what I mean? DJing or whatever. You know what I mean? It's seeing the people's reaction. You know what I mean? Of what you've been doing, which you had no idea. Working on it, you're like, oh, I don't know what and then all of a sudden it comes out. And people come up and say to you, yeah, that track was wicked, I mean, God, I never forgot we was in Toronto once and some woman came up to me after playing one of our tracks, a more rockers track, and she was like, do you know what, that tune was one of the best tunes I've ever heard, I mean, it was like wicked, it was such a nice thing to say, and it was a nice feeling, do you know what I mean, for someone to get, but, and Japan is kind of like that, man, they just love Bristol stuff, man. You know what I mean? It's wicked, but but it's brilliant, because I mean I love Japan. Do you know what I mean? I was out there, I was the same. I was like, oh, check all this out. Do you know what I mean? The buildings, the food, and this and that. The whole vibe is it is different.
Feelings mutual.
Yeah, feelings mutual. That's what I was trying to say.
Mutual appreciation from cross-cultural exchange.
That's what
across the world.
Yeah.
So, got any more questions?
Sorry, mate. Yeah, no, it's only on cassette.
People will pay for that, so it's a money-making scheme, maybe.
Dolby D cassette.
Cool with nature. That's cool with nature.
Yeah, okay, yeah. The original.
The original version.
The demos were better. You're right.
Yeah, they were much better.
Yeah.
It's funny you should mention Japan and nature in the same sentence, because that's where he ended up, isn't it?
Yeah, DJ Nature, Miles. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was doing. Yeah, when he left after the whole Wild Bench thing, he went over to Japan, and he started to do the Major Force label, and was living out there, and then married a Japanese woman, and then.
I just remember listening to his Giles Peterson and him still having that, beat, doing that thing, 20 and something. But he's been living in Tokyo and then LA, New York.
New York. He's in New York. Yeah, he's based in New York now. Yeah.
Well, you can take the boy out of Bristol. You can't take Bristol out of the boy. So, you got any more questions? I feel a little bit like an auctioneer. I want to go.
I'll throw one more.
Go on then.
What's happening? What are you up to? What's happening in the next year? Producing music-wise, what are you doing now? What do you want to achieve?
Well, we're working on me and Ray's working on a few tracks.
Yeah.
At the moment, we'll decide what project that'll be for, and I'm personally just working on a new, it's sort of a development into a new app with somebody that I know, which will hopefully be I don't know if it will take off, but it's a good little venture, a new sort of app of an audio book, like a Kindle book. But I'll say no more because it's a development stage.
Yeah, you don't want anybody to pinch your idea, do you?
Yeah, but I mean, the thing about it is to get some more music out. Get back on it properly is hard. So like Ray said earlier on, it's a bit more tougher when you have a family to tend to, not just free and single in that sort of a way, like when you didn't have children and you just be in the studio 24 hours and just get, because for being creative, having that focus was the thing for me, having that focus and no interruptions. When you got a 4-year-old running around, there's interruptions. You know what I mean? So makes it hard to lock it down to sort of like, get an idea finished or get an album finished, for that matter. Do you know what I mean? But that's the thing that got us to travel around the world for free, which was wicked.
I'm guessing the desire to make music's still there, though.
Yeah,
Never
still
really
do it.
leaves.
Still do it. Still
Yeah,
do it. Even though
always.
when you're not putting anything out, you're still doing it. It's like a hobby. It's a hobby. It's something you enjoy doing. It doesn't matter whether you make money from it. If you it's a good way to live your life. You don't hurt anybody. It cost you nothing.
There you go. Once the music's in you, that's it.
That's right.
Yeah. Pretty much. So.
Yeah, it's not going nowhere. I mean, you listen to bass music, because I started to go to bass sound systems, and I think my first one was 1981, and I'm still going now. You had DJ Stride up here, and he runs one of the biggest dub nights. I'm still going to those dub nights, like I was going back to Shaka in 1981 in Trinity. Still doing it. You can't switch that kind of a thing off, man, when you want to hear those bass frequencies,
And also.
And music, full stop,
Yeah. Yeah, great. So right, is that it? We've probably got about 2 minutes left. If somebody wants to throw in another question, go ahead.
I don't know if you're aware of it nowadays, but what do you feel about the music scene in the city in the present day, or what do you think it needs?
Do you know, it's funny, I was speaking about this with someone the other day. I think a lot of music, some of it needs to get some more soul back in it again, I don't know, and I've been trying to question myself, is it my age where I can't, do you know what I mean, get with some of this new stuff, do you know what I mean, because don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good new stuff out there, but some of this stuff is like, man, you need some soul back in this stuff. I mean, with the whole dubstep thing, I loved it when it was first starting off. It was very creative, very bass, heavy, wicked, you know what I mean, And then all of a sudden it seemed to have got to a point of, it's about who can make the most weirdest sounds, rather than making a melody and making something more soulful, do you know what I mean? It became about the sound more than anything else, and getting sound, and do you know what I mean, being what's the word, extreme with sound and experimenting. That's a good thing, because that's how dub sort of like got to where it got to. It was someone in the studio using a digital delay in a way that in England they weren't using it in pop records, do you know what I mean? Using, do you know what I mean? They were like echoing stuff into infinity, man, do you know what I mean? And bouncing off a wall and coming back and ching 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 ching, and it's like, what? Do you know what I mean? Producers exploiting equipment like that, and in a way dubstep done that with the new parameters that you had on these new bits of equipment, but then it just turned into that sound, you know what I mean? Let's get this wild sound, everybody's jumping and going, yeah, just to hear us. I was like, no, where's the soul in this, So I think there's a lot of new music out there what can get some, do you know what I mean? Get back the soul, do you know what I mean? Some of the 4/4 stuff.
About from, like, if you step outside of like a music making producer perspective, and like more of like a party.
Yeah, we still go out on a weekend and listen. I still do on the strip every weekend. I'm down here.
We're down here on this strip.
Still go, if there's something going on, we still go out and make sure to listen to what's going on. To listen to the new stuff.
Definitely.
Some of it's good, but there's so much out there now, so it just seems like there's a lot of crap. But there is some really good stuff still going on out there. It's just that you've got access to so much stuff these days. It's hard to find it. But Bristol's great, man. We've got the art thing going on, the graffiti thing that ties in with the music. There's not just one thing that this town excels at. There's several things, and they are all connected. Like the graffiti thing is connected to the music thing. Back in the early days, what Delge, Massive Attack, his rapping wasn't that good, but his artwork was good at the time for the thing. So he was known as the graffiti artist.
Graffiti
artist of Bristol, and you get the Americans coming over, you get the top American graffiti artists to come over at the same time and play at jams, while they were playing the music. Sorry to say that, it's rap.
There we go. That's on the record now.
I'll tell you what, guys, I'd like to see what you did at the Fleece one time when you had LD, Tammy, we had like a showcase of all your female singers that had done your tracks.
Okay.
That's what I would personally.
When did you get back? I thought you left.
Back! Just with babysitter, right?
Okay, then
That's, I really enjoyed that night. I thought it was wicked.
Yeah.
So you have to have something to do live. You have to reason for getting a band together. But yeah, it was
It might
okay.
legitimately be impossible now, but that was wicked that night.
Yeah. That was after that was from the K7 album. I
Yeah.
think that, it was around about that time still. I think. Yeah.
Wicked show.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Okay, so that's about it for today. So thank you very much to Pete and Ray. It's been great speaking to you. Thanks.